Okay, hi guys, here we are for chapter 1 of All Quiet on the Western Front. You've already done the first challenge, which had to do with the précis and trying to predict what happens with vocabulary. That was in the paragraph at the beginning of that. In this chapter, we're going to break it up into 4 sections. There are 4 sections of chapter 1, and each section will continue with challenge number 2. And there are a bunch of different things in challenge number 2. So listen carefully and look at your packet in class for each of the things that you'll need to do. So in chapter number 1, what we're going to do is continue what we did in semester 1. In that, we're going to try, as we said before, to figure out the exposition in the plot of All Quiet on the Western Front. This is almost always done in the first sentence, the first paragraph, or the first chapter of a work of fiction. And so in the exposition of any book or short story, etc., what you find are the setting, and you have to be very specific about what the setting is, and the revelation of the characters. And usually the main character is revealed right away. Also, we remember that we have 2 different kinds of characters. We have round characters. Those are the ones that have backgrounds and are usually very, very high up on the list of important characters. And then we have flat characters who are 2-dimensional, not 3-dimensional like round characters. And those 2-dimensional or flat characters help advance the plot. That means they help the main character go from event to event in order to find meaning in the book. So your job, part of your job, is to figure out the exposition of this book in chapter 1, as well as to figure out which characters have been introduced, whether or not they're round or flat characters, and how those characters relate to each other. Also in chapter 1, we'll figure out more vocabulary. We'll keep a vocabulary log. That'll be part of it. And we'll introduce the idea of imagery into the book. This book is a heavy imagery book, and there are many, many examples of those things that are images. For example, as we've also already discussed, images are descriptive adjectives, words like sensory words that describe other things, such as fuzzy puppies, etc. It can also be metaphors or similes, which are comparisons. Metaphors are the stronger comparison, and similes are the less strong comparison. You can differentiate between them by understanding that similes use the words like or as in their description. For example, I am a dog is a metaphor. It's a very strong comparison. I am like a dog is a little bit less strong, but using the word like, it's still a simile that creates an image. And then finally, we have auditory images. Those are the ones that are sounds. So for example, if words in a book describe a church bell ringing, that creates an image that you think of through the use of sound. Okay, so those are some of the things that we're going to be looking for in this first chapter. Let's see. I think that's it for now. All right, so I'll explain the challenges again at the end, and we'll discuss. All right, so here's the first section of chapter 1 of All Quiet on the Western Front. Again, I'm not going to be looking at you when I read. 1. We are at rest, 5 miles behind the front. Yesterday we were relieved, and now our bellies are full of beef and haricot beans. We are satisfied and at peace. Each man has another mess tin full for the evening, and, what is more, there is a double ration of sausage and bread. That puts a man in fine trim. We have not had such luck as this for a long time. The cook with his carroty head is begging us to eat. He beckons with his ladle to everyone that passes and spoons him out a great dollop. He does not see how he can empty his stew pot in time for coffee. Jaden and Mueller have produced 2 wash basins and had them filled up to the brim as a reserve. In Jaden, this is veracity. In Mueller, it is foresight. Where Jaden puts it all is a mystery, for he is and always will be as thin as a rake. What's more important still is the issue of a double ration of smokes: 10 cigars, 20 cigarettes, and 2 quids of chew per man. Now that is decent. I have exchanged my chewing tobacco with Kaczynski for his cigarettes, which means I have 40 altogether. That's enough for a day. It is true we have no right to this windfall. The Prussian is not so generous. We have only a miscalculation to thank for it. 14 days ago, we had to go up and relieve the front line. It was fairly quiet on our sector. So the quartermaster, who remained in the rear, had requisitioned the usual quantity of rations and provided the full company of 150 men. But on the last day, an astonishing number of English heavies opened up on us with high explosive, drumming ceaselessly on our position, so that we suffered severely and came back only 80 strong. Last night, we moved back and settled down to a good sleep for once. Kaczynski is right when he says it would not be such a bad war if only one could get a little more sleep. In the line, we have had next to none, and 14 days is a long time at one stretch. It was noon before the first of us crawled out of our quarters. Half an hour later, every man had his mess tin, and we gathered at the cookhouse, which smelt greasy and nourishing. At the head of the queue, of course, were the hungriest. Little Albert Kropp, the clearest thinker among us, and therefore only a lance corporal. Mueller, who still carries his school textbooks with him, dreams of examinations, and during a bombardment mutters propositions in physics. Lear, who wears a full beard and has a preference for the girls from officers' brothels. He swears that they are obliged by an army order to wear silk chemises and to bathe before entertaining guests of the rank of captain and upwards. And as the fourth, myself, Paul Baumer, all 4 are 19 years of age, and all 4 joined up from the same class as volunteers for the war. Close behind us were our friends, Jaden, a skinny locksmith of our own age, the biggest eater of the company. He sits down to eat as thin as a grasshopper and gets up as big as a bug in the family way. That means pregnant. High Westhouse, of the same age, a peat digger, that means a dirt digger, who can easily hold a ration loaf in his hand and say, "Guess what? I've got it in my fist." Then Dettering, a peasant who thinks of nothing but his farmyard and his wife. And finally, Stanislaus Kaczynski, the leader of our group, shrewd, cunning, and hard-bitten, 40 years of age with a face of the soil, blue eyes, bent shoulders, and a remarkable nose for dirty weather, good food, and soft jobs. Our gang formed the head of the queue before the cookhouse. We were growing impatient, for the cook paid no attention to us. Finally, Kaczynski called to him, "Say, Heinrich, open up the soup kitchen. Anyone can see the beans are done." He shook his head sleepily. "You must all be there first." Jaden grinned. "We are all here." The sergeant cook still took no notice. "That may do for you," he said, "but where are the others?" "They won't be fed by you today. They're either in the dressing station," that's the hospital, "or pushing up daisies." That means dead. The cook was quite disconcerted as the facts dawned on him. He was staggered. "And I have cooked for 150 men." Kropp poked him in the ribs. "Then for once, we'll have enough. Come on, begin." Suddenly, a vision came over Jaden. His sharp, mousy features began to shine. His eyes grew small with cunning. His jaws twitched, and he whispered hoarsely, "Man, then you've got bread for 150 men too, huh?" Sergeant Cook nodded absent-minded and bewildered. Jaden seized him by the tunic And sausage? Ginger nodded again. Jaden's chaps quivered. Tobacco, too? Yes, everything. Jaden beamed. What a bean feast! That's all for us! Each man gets... Wait a bit. Yes, practically 2 issues. Then Ginger stirred himself and said, That won't do. We got excited and began to crowd around. Why won't that do, you old carrot? Demanded Kaczynski. 80 men can't have what is meant for 150. We'll soon show you, growled Mueller. I don't care about the stew, but I only issue rations for 80 men, persisted Ginger. Kaczynski got angry. You might be generous for once. You haven't drawn food for 80 men. You've drawn it for the second company. Good. Let's have it then. We are the second company. We began to jostle the fellow. No one felt kindly toward him, for it was his fault that the food often came up to us in the line too late and cold. Under shell fire, he wouldn't bring his kitchen up near enough, so that our soup carriers had to get much farther than those of the other companies. Now, Bulk of the first company is a much better fellow. He is as fat as a hamster in winter, but he trundles his pots when it comes to that, right up to the very front line. We were in just the right mood, and there would certainly have been a dust-up, that's a fight, if our company commander had not appeared. He informed himself of the dispute and only remarked, Yes, we did have heavy losses yesterday. He glanced into the Dixie, that's the kitchen. The beans look good, Ginger nodded, cooked with meat and fat. The lieutenant looked at us. He knew what we were thinking, and he knew many other things too, because he came to the company as a non-com and was promoted from the ranks. He lifted the lid from the Dixie again and sniffed, then passing on, he said, Bring me a plateful. Serve out all the rations. We can do with them. Ginger looked sheepish as Jaden danced round him. It doesn't cost you anything. Anyone would think the quartermaster's store belonged to him. And now, get on with it, you old blubber sticker, and don't you miscount either. You be hanged, spat Ginger. When things got beyond him, he throws up the sponge altogether. He just goes to pieces. And as if to show that all things were equal to him, of his own free will, he issued in addition a half-pound of synthetic honey to each man. Okay, that's the first section of chapter 1. In a little while, I'll read the other chapters sections on a separate video. All right, so your challenge so far, remember, is that you're looking for the exposition. Lots of characters have been introduced so far in just that short amount of time. And what you want to try and do is you want to try and figure out if they're round or flat characters and how important they are and how you can tell how important they are. You want to start writing down all the vocabulary that you've encountered so far. You want to try and begin to figure out which words are more important than others. You want to begin to understand some of the images that are involved. So again, look into your packet. For all of chapter 1, you have to find 5 good images of different kinds, similes and adjectives and metaphors and auditory images that help us understand a bigger idea in the story. Okay? Section 2 of chapter 1 coming up.